On Memorial Day morning, the war scrap heap caught the first light. The metal shimmered faintly beneath a film of dust, a quiet ocean of rusted memories. He stood there, cap-low gloves, stained wiping dirt from a steel beam stamped 1944. The radio on the windowsill hummed a low roll call, names of the fallen one after another like slow rain. The town was still half asleep. Flags hung limp along the empty street. He listened each name like a pulse, steady but far away. Then came a voice behind him, young, uncertain. "Sir, are you selling any of this?" He turned. A boy barely 20 stood at the gate, a camera hanging from his neck recording everything and nothing. "This," he tapped the beam with a knuckle. "Depends who's asking." He gave a small, crooked smile. "And who's remembering?" The student hesitated. "It looks heavy." "It is," he said. "Some things stay that way." For a moment neither spoke. The boy lifted his camera, then lowered it again, unsure if he should. The old man brushed the dust from his hands and looked out across the piles, engine parts, helmet frames, half a Jeep door folded like paper. The boy said quietly, "People online say it's just junk." He didn't look up. They said that back then too. From the fence, a gust of wind tore a loose sheet of paper, slapping it against the chain links. The student reached for it, then froze. Notice of removal. City order. 29 days remaining. The man didn't move. The sound of the radio filled the silence again, another list of names. "You have to clear it?" the boy asked. He nodded once. "They say it's unsafe. I say it's unfinished." The boy frowned. "You built this yard?" "No." "War did," he said softly. "I just kept what was left." Dust drifted between them, the air thick with the smell of oil and rain that hadn't yet fallen. "You fought." He nodded again, but his eyes stayed on the beam in his hand. "A long time ago. This was part of a landing bridge. Now it's just a reminder of how steel forgets faster than people." The student stepped closer, tilting his camera. "Maybe you could turn it into something. A sculpture or—" He cut him off gently. "Peace doesn't come from art, son. It comes from remembering the weight of what we already built." A truck passed on the distant road, scattering dust. The boy filmed the piles for a few seconds, then lowered his camera. "I could help you tell the story," he said. "If you'd let me." The old man didn't answer. He reached for the bent beam from the barracks, still marked with faded paint, and leaned it upright against a post as though testing its strength. The motion stirred another puff of dust light as ash gone by the next breath. "Should war relics be melted down or remembered?" the boy asked at last. He paused, eyes on the beam. "You'll find out," he said quietly, "when someone tries to melt yours." The boy blinked, not sure what that meant. The old man wiped his hands on his rag, folded the city notice neatly, and slid it into his pocket. Then he turned back to the heap, one hand resting on the cold steel. The radio kept reading names. The camera light blinked once, recording him in silence. And still he kept working. The morning light cut through the dusty windows of the workshop. Inside, the air shimmered with heat and the faint sweet tang of molten metal. He stood over the furnace sleeves, rolled up the war-scarred pieces of armor stacked beside him like a quiet graveyard. The flame hissed a live orange, swallowing gray. He held the dented plate steady with the tongs the same way he might hold a memory, carefully unwilling to let it fall apart. "This," he said under his breath, voice barely louder than the fan is war scrap, becoming something new. The armor softened, then pooled. He poured the metal into a small circular mold. Steam rose in halos. Every hiss sounded like the whisper of a name he hadn't spoken in years. The student filmmaker stood nearby, camera lowered. "You do this every day?" "Not every day," the old man said. "Only when it feels heavy enough to start again." The boy watched the metal harden. "They called it junk," he murmured. The veteran's eyes lifted. "Guess I see what's left of service." They both stared at the faint glow of the cooling metal. The man placed the finished coin on a folded rag, gentle, almost reverent. It gleamed dull gold in the lamplight edges, imperfect center rippled like water. He nodded toward it. "Every piece I melt down, I say one name." The boy frowned. Whose name? Someone who never came back to claim theirs. For a long time, only the fan hummed, the smell of hot iron mixed with machine oil and rain, though the sky outside was still blue. The boy stepped closer. "You're making something sacred out of scrap." He smiled faintly. "No, just giving it work again." A hammer slipped from the table, clanging sharp against the floor. Both of them flinched, and the noise echoed too long like a verdict. The man stooped, picked it up, and set it aside. "City sent another reminder," he said. "They'll vote tomorrow. Decide if this place stays or gets cleared." The boy lowered his camera. "You'll go." He shook his head. "Paperwork slammed me weeks ago. Protocol signatures, new forms, they always win first round." He looked at his hands, thick, black, and steady. "Thing about steel," he said quietly, "is it never argues back." Outside, thunder rolled, even though no clouds crossed the sun. Raindrops began to tap the roof, slow, deliberate, like someone testing forgiveness one drop at a time. The boy tilted his head. Rain. It was clear a minute ago. He didn't answer. He just turned the coin over on the rag, letting the drops sizzle when they reached it. "Can forgiveness be built from ruins?" the boy asked. The old man finally met his gaze. "Only if someone's willing to lift the first piece." They stood there, two silhouettes framed by the steam and the low hum of the furnace. The coin cooled, turning silver gray, its shape caught halfway between purpose and memory. He reached for it, thumb tracing the edge. "Tomorrow," he said, "they vote on what's left of peace." The boy didn't reply. The rain kept falling, the furnace exhaled, and the sound of dripping filled the workshop like a heartbeat, learning how to start again. The town hall buzzed under the hard hum of fluorescent lights. Rows of folding chairs filled the narrow room, their legs scraping the tile in restless rhythm. A poster on the wall read, "Community Safety Board, Monthly Review," and beside it a small American flag drooped in the stale air. He sat near the back cap, folded in his hands. The same dust from the yard seemed to have followed him here, settling on his boots, on his cuffs, on the small metal coin in his pocket. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Item 12, she said briskly, addressing the removal order for Parcel 9B, listed as War Scrap Yard. A few heads turned. The planner adjusted his glasses. "The site is unsafe," he declared. "Unstable materials, rust, possible contamination. Frankly, it's a liability." The veteran rose slowly, the movement measured, respectful. "Ma'am," he began, voice low but steady, "that scrap belonged to the town long before I did." She frowned. "You're not authorized to store military waste." "It's not waste," he said, pulling the coin from his pocket. Its dull gleam caught the light like an old medal rediscovered. "This came from war scrap. Now it'll carry a name." A murmur rippled through the room. The planner sighed. "A coin doesn't change zoning codes." "No," he said quietly, "but maybe it changes how we look at what's left behind." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even the fluorescent hum seemed to pause. The student camera slung around his neck lifted it just enough to frame the man's hands. The lens trembled, as if recording something heavier than sound. The veteran's fingers opened, showing the coin flat on his palm. "Every piece I melt down is a person remembered," he said. "We built bridges with this steel once. Maybe it's time it built peace instead." He closed his hand again. From the side of the room, a man muttered, "Sentimental doesn't fix safety." The old man nodded. "You're right, but maybe safety starts when we stop pretending peace comes free." The student lowered the camera, eyes wide. Someone coughed. The silence grew thick enough to bend the air. At the coffee table near the wall, the percolator hissed softly. Steam curled upward like a pale ribbon catching in the strip of light above. That faint hiss, that rising warmth, it was the only sound between them. He turned to face the board. "Young folks deserve to see where peace starts," he said simply. "Not from a monument someone built far away, but from a yard we almost forgot to save." His words hung there, unpolished, honest. The chairwoman looked down at her notes, then at the others. "We'll take a brief recess," she murmured. He sat back down, eyes lowered, hands folded around the coin as if it might cool the tremor in his chest. The student leaned over. "They'll vote soon." "Soon enough," the man said. Across the room, the planner watched him, his expression unreadable. A drop of coffee hit the table, dark and round as the coin. 10 minutes later, the board returned. Papers shuffled. The chairwoman spoke without looking up. "Motion passes. By one vote." He exhaled, slow, soundless. The boy caught it on film, the small lift of his shoulders, the faint shake of his head. Permit granted barely. Dawn came soft and gray, the kind of morning that smelled like new earth and wet flags. Mist hung over the open yard where the piles of war scrap once rose like mountains. Now only a wooden frame cut across the mud, a square waiting for its first stone. He stood there a long moment, cap in hand, the wind brushing against the faded cloth. The student was already filming his breath, clouding in the chill. "You sure you don't want to wait for the crew?" the boy asked. He shook his head. "Some things you lay down yourself." He knelt by the frame. The beam stamped 1944 lay beside him, clean trimmed, its edges softened. He placed the small coin in the center of the cement bucket, letting it catch the morning light. "Every bridge starts with one anchor," he said. "What's that mean?" He smiled faintly. "Means peace don't pour itself." He dipped the trowel, spread the cement, and set the first stone cut from what once was war scrap. His hands moved slow, sure deliberate, the same rhythm that once held a rifle, now holding patience instead. The church on the hill began to stir. A low choir hum floated through the air, half hymn, half memory. The old man paused, listening. "That's been missing a long time," he whispered. The planter approached quietly from behind shoes, sinking into wet soil. "You started early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." The younger man watched, hands buried in his coat pockets. "You really think this'll change anything?" The veteran pressed the stone firm, his knuckles white with effort. "Maybe not the world," he said, "but maybe one morning someone will walk by and see what peace looks like when it works." A hammer strike echoed from the nearby scaffold, once twice steady as breath. The sound filled the space like a heartbeat returning to an old house. The planter shifted. "I read your file. You were with the bridge battalion." He nodded. "We built crossings no one remembers. Thought maybe I'd build one people could use this time." The planter exhaled, his voice softer now. "I almost voted against you." "I know. Bureaucracy's a hard thing to fight." The old man looked up. "So is silence." Raindrops began to fall, gentle at first, then more certain. They slid across the frame, across the coin resting in wet cement. Each drop struck like a tiny absolution, washing rust from the edges of what was once violence. He didn't move. He let the rain fall. "You hear that?" he asked. "Hear what forgiveness," he said. The planter looked down, hat in hand now, not from regulation, but from respect. The boy's camera caught the moment, the rain, the bowed head, the slow breath of a man who had carried steel too long. The cement darkened ripples spreading outward like years finally settling. The choir's hum grew stronger, voices lifting over the soft percussion of rain. The planter spoke again, barely above the sound. "You think people will remember?" The old man brushed mud from the base of the frame. "Maybe not my name," he said, "but maybe the weight will feel lighter next time." They stood under the gray morning, three figures framed against the half-finished monument. The hammer echoed again, marking each breath, each quiet victory over the noise of forgetting. He looked at the stone one last time. The metal within it glowed faintly under the rain, a reflection of both burden and mercy. For the first time he saw the scrap not as ruin, but as peace, something finally laid down, finally forgiven. And as the camera blinked red, capturing that small transformation, he let his eyes close and whispered, "Let it hold." A month later, sunlight spilled across the small memorial yard where once the war scrap piles had stood. The wooden frame was gone, replaced by smooth foundation bench stones, their surfaces warm from the morning light. Grass had begun to creep through the edges, softening what used to be jagged ground. Families gathered, filling the space with the quiet murmur of reunion, the sound of people finding words again after long silence. He stood off to the side, hat low, coat clean for the first time in years. The student's camera whirred nearby, catching laughter, the shimmer of children's hands tracing the engraved stones. One boy ran his fingers over the carved line on the central plaque, "Peace built by hands once at war." The veteran watched him carefully. The child looked up and asked, "Did you fight, mister?" He smiled, slow and measured. "A long time ago, before you were born." The boy squinted at the plaque again. "So, you built peace now." He chuckled softly. I helped it remember where to stand." A group of neighbors came over carrying coffee cups and folding chairs. One of them, a man from the hardware store, grinned. "Never thought I'd see the day this old lot turned into something beautiful." Another added, "Guess the city's first art came from the dump." The small crowd laughed, the kind of laughter that releases more than it entertains. The veteran's shoulders eased, and he allowed himself a smile that didn't feel like work. The planner was there too, coat unbuttoned, hat tucked under his arm. He nodded toward the plaque. "We approved a new line in the records," he said quietly. "Official designation, Memorial of Reconciliation." The old man looked at him. So, thought maybe the name should mean what it's been doing, the planner said. Not just what it used to be. The veteran gave a slow nod. Sometimes bureaucracy learns faster than men. The planner laughed, shaking his head. "Don't tell my department that." Near the stone benches, 2 older women knelt to place flowers, nothing formal, just daisies from a kitchen jar. One of them whispered, "My brother worked in the foundry after the war. He'd like this." Wind brushed through the yard, lifting the small paper flags tied to the fence. From the chapel, up the hill, came the faint trace of a choir note, soft and low, threading through the open air. The veteran turned his face toward it, eyes half closed. He could almost feel the echo settle into the stones themselves, as if the yard were breathing again after years of holding its breath. The student stepped closer, camera rolling. "You ever think people would come here like this?" He shrugged. "Didn't think about it much. Just figured peace ought to have a seat somewhere." The boy smiled. "It does now." He nodded. "Then don't let it rust." They stood there together, wind carrying the voices of the crowd, laughter mingling with memory. The camera lens caught everything, the sunlight, the glint of the coin buried under the foundation, the way faces looked lighter when forgiveness finally found a shape. The choir's note faded under the wind, leaving behind only the sound of the town alive and ordinary again. The student lowered the camera, glancing toward the veteran. "Museum's ready to screen it next month," he said. "I'll bring you." The old man's eyes stayed on the plaque. "You bring them," he said. "I'll be here." The boy nodded, a promise caught in the hum of summer air. He packed up the tripod, the lens still warm from the sun, and for a moment the camera reflected the yard, quiet, clean, full. In that reflection, the man stood still beside the stones, and peace stood still beside him. The museum lights dimmed until only the glow of the screen remained. Rows of folding chairs filled the small gallery, each one occupied by faces lit in soft gray. The first frame flickered to life. The yard, the beam stamped, 1944. The slow hands laying the first stone. He sat in the last row, hat folded on his knees. The hum of the projector reminded him of the old engines on convoy nights, steady, patient, never hurried. On screen, the coin gleamed in fresh cement, the choir hum barely audible under the sound of rain. A subtitle read, "Peace Built by Hands, Once at War." In the second row, a boy whispered, "That's him." A woman answered, "Quiet now. Let it play." The film cut between faces, children laughing at the memorial, neighbors placing flowers, the planner lowering his hat. The lens found light in ordinary gestures, catching forgiveness where no one had looked before. When the shot appeared of him kneeling by the wooden frame laying that first stone, the crowd rose, not applauding, not speaking, just rising in silence. A reverent hush filled the room, the kind that feels like air learning how to hold gratitude. He stayed seated. The sound of rain on film merged with the faint patter outside the real window. For a moment, the two worlds, the one he built and the one he remembered, were the same. The student turned in his seat, eyes shining in the light of his own work. After the credits rolled, he walked to the back row. "Didn't expect that kind of quiet," he said softly. The veteran smiled. "Quiet's where truth fits best." People began to leave, speaking low, their words gentle. A curator wiped at her eyes, murmuring, "We'll keep the plaque by the entrance. Let it stay with the film." He nodded. "Then it'll keep its promise." The boy hesitated, then lifted the camera from his shoulder. "It's yours," he said. "You started it." The old man shook his head. "No, you carry it. You're the one who saw." The student pressed the camera into his hands anyway. "Then maybe we both remember." He looked down at the worn casing, its strap frayed like the hem of an old uniform. The machine was light, but it carried the weight of something finished and something beginning again. On screen, the final line faded in white letters. Peace remembers who laid the first stone. He stood, hat in one hand, camera in the other, the glow of the projector washing over him like dawn. The reel clicked off, leaving the room in stillness, and in that silence the stones remembered.